I've been a cardiologist for over 2 decades. I've written thousands of prescriptions. I've told thousands of patients to take their lisinopril, their amlodipine, their beta blockers every single morning for the rest of their lives. And most of them do it. They trust me. They fill the prescription. They come back in 3 months. Blood pressure's still high, and I increase the dose. What I never said, what almost no doctor says, is that there's a population of people in this country whose blood pressure is, by modern medical standards, extraordinary. We've studied them, we know why, and we've done almost nothing with that information. Not because it doesn't work, but because it's not profitable. It's not a pill, and honestly, it makes us look bad for not leading with it. I'm talking about the Amish. And before you click away thinking this is going to be some romanticized back-to-nature fantasy, stay with me. Because what researchers found when they actually measured, actually studied, actually compared Amish communities against the general American population, it upended a lot of what I thought I knew. The average blood pressure in old order Amish adults is significantly lower than the national average. Not marginally, significantly. Researchers from the University of Maryland spent years embedded in these communities, taking measurements, doing labs, mapping lifestyle patterns. What they found wasn't magic. It wasn't genetics. The Amish aren't biologically different from us. What they found was a very specific combination of dietary and lifestyle habits that, when replicated, produce blood pressure numbers that most of my patients haven't seen since their 20s. And the part that bothers me the most, the part that keeps me up at night as a doctor, is that we already knew this. The research has been sitting there, and instead of leading with it, we lead with the prescription pad. So let me tell you what's actually going on. Let me tell you what the Amish are doing differently. And let me tell you why, if you follow even 70% of this for 90 days, there is a very real, very scientifically grounded chance that you will watch your blood pressure drop, sometimes dramatically, without changing your medication at all, or at least giving your doctor a reason to start reducing it. Let's start with the one thing everyone gets wrong about Amish food. People assume it's healthy because it's simple. That's not exactly true. Traditional Amish cooking is hearty. It's filling. It involves bread, potatoes, meat, butter, whole milk, pies. This is not a low-calorie diet. It is not a low-fat diet. If a nutrition influencer looked at a traditional Amish meal plan, they might actually cringe. And yet, the blood pressure numbers are extraordinary. So what is going on? The first piece is something researchers call the sodium-potassium ratio. Not sodium alone, not potassium alone, the ratio between them. This is one of the most underappreciated variables in hypertension management, and almost no doctor talks about it with patients because it requires a nuanced conversation that's hard to have in a 12-minute appointment. Here's the simple version. Your blood pressure is regulated in part by how much fluid your body retains. Sodium causes you to retain fluid. Potassium helps your kidneys flush it out. The problem in the modern American diet isn't just that we eat too much sodium, although we do. The deeper problem is that we eat almost no potassium. The recommended intake is around 4,700 milligrams a day. The average American gets maybe 2,000. Meanwhile, we're eating 3,000 to 4,000 milligrams of sodium. That ratio is a disaster for your blood vessels. The Amish diet, despite being heavy and calorie-dense, is loaded with potassium. Fresh vegetables from their own gardens. Homegrown potatoes, one of the most potassium-rich foods that exists. Whole milk. Beans, beets, squash. They're not counting macros. They're not tracking anything. But by eating close to the source, by eating food that hasn't been stripped and processed and reformulated, they naturally land in a potassium-rich profile that gives their kidneys a fighting chance. If you do one single thing after watching this, one thing, increase your potassium intake dramatically. A medium potato with the skin on has over 900 milligrams. A cup of cooked white beans has over 1,000. A cup of spinach has 800. A banana has 420. Stack these every day. Get to 4,000 milligrams if you can. Watch what happens to your blood pressure over 60 days. This one change alone, documented in multiple clinical trials, can lower systolic pressure by 4 to 8 points. That doesn't sound like a lot until you remember that most blood pressure medications lower it by 6 to 10. You can get close to drug-level results from eating a potato and some beans. Now here's the second piece, and this one is harder to swallow, pun intended. The Amish almost never eat alone. Meals are communal. Meals are slow. Meals involve conversation and sitting and being present. There's no scrolling through a phone. There's no eating in the car. There's no scarfing down lunch at a desk while answering emails. Why does this matter for blood pressure? Because of cortisol, because of the sympathetic nervous system, because of something called the stress response, which when chronically activated, when you are always slightly in fight or flight mode, always slightly tense, always slightly behind, causes your blood vessels to stay constricted. That chronic low-grade constriction is a huge driver of essential hypertension. The kind of hypertension that has no clear single cause. The kind that most of my patients have. Eating slowly, eating with other people, eating in a relaxed state. It activates the parasympathetic nervous system. It literally tells your blood vessels to relax. And doing this consistently, 3 times a day, every day, compounds over weeks and months into a measurably different baseline state for your cardiovascular system. This isn't soft science. The DASH diet, which is the gold standard dietary intervention for hypertension, recommended by every major cardiology organization, specifically notes that stress reduction and mindful eating patterns amplify its blood pressure effects. We just don't tell patients that. We hand them the DASH diet pamphlet, and we don't mention that how you eat matters almost as much as what you eat. Third piece, and this one is going to surprise you. The Amish eat a lot of fermented food, fermented vegetables, fermented dairy, real, traditionally cultured buttermilk, yogurt made from scratch, aged cheeses, pickled beets, sauerkraut. Not the pasteurized, shelf-stable stuff you buy in a can. Real, lacto-fermented foods with live cultures. The research on the gut-blood pressure connection has exploded in the last decade. We now know that the gut microbiome directly influences blood pressure through multiple pathways. Gut bacteria produce short-chain fatty acids that regulate blood vessel tone. They influence nitric oxide production, nitric oxide being the molecule that tells blood vessels to dilate. They modulate inflammation, and chronic vascular inflammation is one of the main drivers of arterial stiffness, which is the mechanical reason why blood pressure creeps up as we age. A disrupted microbiome, one that's been beaten up by processed food, by excess sugar, by antibiotics, by stress, produces less of these beneficial compounds. And we're only now starting to understand how directly that shows up in blood pressure readings. The Amish have been eating fermented food their entire lives, since childhood, because that's how food preservation worked before refrigeration. Not because anyone told them it was healthy, just because it was practical. And their microbiomes reflect that. Adding even 1 serving of genuinely fermented food per day, real sauerkraut, real kimchi, real yogurt with live cultures, real kefir, has been shown to produce measurable changes in gut bacterial diversity within 4 to 6 weeks. And those changes show up in blood pressure. Fourth piece. This one I find fascinating from a biochemistry standpoint. The Amish use a lot of apple cider vinegar in cooking, in drinks, in food preservation. This is not a coincidence. Acetic acid, the active compound in vinegar, has a direct effect on the enzyme that regulates angiotensin-converting enzyme activity. You may recognize that phrase because ACE inhibitors are one of the most commonly prescribed classes of blood pressure medication. Lisinopril is an ACE inhibitor. Ramipril is an ACE inhibitor. They work by blocking the conversion of angiotensin I to angiotensin II, which is a potent vasoconstrictor. Acetic acid does something similar, not at drug-level potency, but consistently, every day, in food, it adds up. Multiple studies, including peer-reviewed research published in journals I read regularly, have demonstrated statistically significant reductions in systolic blood pressure from regular apple cider vinegar consumption. The mechanism is real. The effect is modest but cumulative. 1 to 2 tablespoons a day, diluted in water, because the acidity will damage your tooth enamel if you drink it straight. That's it. It's not glamorous. It's not a supplement you pay $60 a month for. It's a $4 bottle at any grocery store. Fifth piece, sleep. And I know you've heard about sleep 1,000 times, but hear me out, because the Amish relationship with sleep is genuinely different from ours, in a way that has a direct cardiovascular consequence most people don't understand. The Amish go to sleep when it gets dark and wake up when it gets light, without exception, across the whole community. This means their circadian rhythm, their internal body clock, is almost perfectly synchronized with the natural light cycle. And it turns out that circadian misalignment, which is what virtually every modern person has to some degree because of artificial light and screens and irregular schedules, is an independent risk factor for hypertension. Your blood pressure follows a circadian pattern. It drops at night during sleep. This is called nocturnal dipping, and it rises in the morning before you wake up. If your circadian rhythm is disrupted, that nocturnal dip doesn't happen properly. Your blood vessels never get their rest period. Your sympathetic nervous system never fully downregulates overnight. And over months and years, this produces chronically elevated baseline pressure. Researchers have found that non-dippers, people whose blood pressure doesn't drop properly at night, have significantly higher rates of cardiovascular events, heart attacks, strokes. And the main driver of non-dipping in otherwise healthy people is circadian disruption. The Amish are almost universally dippers. Their nocturnal blood pressure profiles look like textbook examples of healthy cardiovascular function, not because of genetics, because they go to sleep at 9 and wake up at 5, and they've done it their entire lives. You don't have to become Amish to fix this, but turning your lights down after 8 p.m., getting off your phone an hour before bed, keeping your sleep schedule consistent even on weekends, these are not optional wellness suggestions. For blood pressure specifically, they are interventions with documented clinical effect. Now let me pull this together and give you the actual protocol. Because I don't want this to be a list of interesting facts that you nod at and forget, I want you to have something you can start tomorrow. For the first 30 days, focus entirely on potassium. That's your only dietary job. Hit 4,000 milligrams a day. Track it for the first 2 weeks so you understand what that looks like. Then you won't need to anymore. Eat a potato every day. Eat leafy greens every day. Add beans to at least one meal. This is not a diet overhaul. It is one nutritional correction. Starting week 2, add fermented food. 1 serving per day. Real sauerkraut, real kefir, real yogurt. Check the label. It should say live and active cultures. If it doesn't, it's not doing what you need it to do. Starting week 3, add apple cider vinegar. 1 tablespoon in 8 ounces of water, once a day. Morning works best for most people. Do this consistently. Starting week 4, work on your sleep schedule. Pick a sleep time and a wake time. Hold it for 7 days straight. Even if you feel fine sleeping inconsistently, your blood vessels don't feel fine. Give your body a rhythm. In month 2, start working on meal environment. Sit down, eat without screens. Give yourself 20 minutes minimum per meal. This feels insignificant. It is not insignificant. In month 3, if you've been consistent with the first 2 months, get a blood pressure reading, not one reading. An average of readings taken at the same time each day for 5 days. Compare it to where you started. I have patients who have done versions of this, not because I prescribed it. I prescribed medication and mentioned it as a side note. But the ones who took it seriously, who actually did it, who committed to the protocol. I have watched blood pressure drop 15, 20, in some cases 25 points systolic. I have had patients come back in month 3, and I have reduced their medication. I have had patients come off medication entirely under medical supervision. I'm not telling you to stop your medication. I'm not telling you that diet replaces drugs in every case. Severe hypertension needs medication, full stop. But I am telling you that for the majority of people with stage 1 hypertension, with readings in the 130 to 150 range, with no underlying pathology, the medication is often the first intervention when it should be the last. The Amish didn't design their lifestyle to have perfect blood pressure. They designed it to live close to the earth, to eat what they grow, to rest when it's dark, to eat together, to ferment and preserve food the old way. The cardiovascular benefit is a side effect of a way of life that is fundamentally lower in the inputs that destroy blood vessel health. You cannot replicate their entire life. You don't need to. You need to replicate the mechanisms, the potassium, the fermented food, the acetic acid, the sleep rhythm, the parasympathetic activation at meals. These are not cultural artifacts. These are biological levers, and they are available to anyone. 90 days. That's what the research suggests is the minimum time frame to see meaningful, sustained change in blood pressure through lifestyle intervention. Not because the body is slow, but because blood pressure regulation involves long-term adaptations in vascular tone, microbiome composition, and hormonal baseline, none of which change in a week. Give it 90 days. Be honest with yourself about whether you're actually doing it. Measure the result. Then have a conversation with your doctor about what you found. I've spent my career helping people manage a condition that in many cases could have been addressed before it required management at all. I'm not saying that to be self-critical. I'm saying it because the information exists, the research exists, and you deserve to have it. Your blood pressure does not have to be a life sentence. It can be a message, and the Amish, without knowing it, wrote the translation.